started with a perceived state of calm, that is in Nairobi CBD, but what we've seen as the day progresses is a contingent of security officers opening up roads as well as engaging protesters within the CBD in tear gas canisters and of course keeping them at bay. We've also seen a display of coffins on most of those streets within the Nairobi CBD where protesters continue to protest and mill around town, businesses remaining closed for the better part of the day. This being 2 p.m. now, we still are seeing the presence of security officers in roads leading to State House and feeder roads leading to the CBD, forcing motorists to use alternative routes. Now, the protests are entering their third week, and the protest was sparked by the passage of the Finance Bill 2024. We're keeping a look at what is happening in other parts of the country. Let's cross over to Machakos County, where things there are also pretty much what we are seeing in parts of the CBD here in Nairobi, with protesters also blocking parts of the streets there in Machakos County as they protest what they say is a bad state of affairs in the country. This albeit the fact that the president himself bowed to increasing pressure and withdrew the bill, but still, despite the president extending this olive branch, we are seeing such scenes around parts of the country. The pictures on your screen right now are of Waiyaki Way here in Nairobi. Waiyaki Way is the central point between Kangemi and Westlands area of Nairobi, and this is what's happening there. Earlier we saw scenes of protesters hurling stones at security officers who, in retaliation, lobbed tear gas canisters, despite there having been a ruling made against, the use of water cannons as well as bullets against protesters. We are seeing the police under increasing pressure there, where they are trying to keep protesters at bay, and that is happening as of now. The Gen Z, of course, has been marching in support of solidarity with their cause. While the unrest may have been sparked by the finance bill, frustrations continue to simmer over the country's economic growth, which many feel has failed to keep up with population growth, and the Generation Z now inviting everybody in the country that cares about the state of affairs, particularly the economic state of affairs, to join them and marshal their support and show up in solidarity with their cause. So those are the pictures that we are getting from different parts of the country. Let's listen in. Those are streets from Nairobi Central Business District, where, as you can see, Kenyans are back on the streets today, continuing with their protests against the Finance Bill 2024, albeit the fact that the president changed his stance on this. And these are the Gen Zs who continue to express their disappointment and unhappiness with President William Ruto's leadership. They have continued to sustain the protests today, and what you can see there are security officers keeping them at bay. And this albeit the fact that President Ruto on Sunday night assured that there would be dialogue that would be held between him and the Gen Zs over the demonstrations that have been happening, and listening really to what it is that they have to say about the current state of the nation. Police are there on the streets, keeping these protesters at bay, even as we continue to see scenes reminiscent of what is happening in Nairobi and other parts of the country. We have seen Mombasa County, we have seen Machakos County, we have seen Kisumu and Eldoret, where a replica of what is currently happening here in Nairobi CBD continue to be seen. And according to protesters, they feel that there is yet much that remains to be done as regards the state of affairs in the country, the economic growth, the unemployment levels in the country. Even as the government continues to say that Kenya is at high risk of debt distress, Kenyans continue to express their displeasure on the streets in various parts of the country, with the hashtag Occupy CBD coming before the protest that we're seeing today, being Tuesday. A contingent of security officers also cordoning roads leading to State House, forcing motorists to use alternative routes. And these protests are now entering their third week. The protests being sparked off initially by the Finance Bill 2024, which the National Assembly passed in June. However, President Ruto did bow to increasing pressure and withdrew the bill. Still, the Gen Zs and indeed everybody else that has joined them in marshalling support, all Kenyans from all walks and sizes and ages now joining the clarion call for the government to listen to their concerns. While the unrest may have been sparked by the Finance Bill, many say that frustrations have continued to grow over the lack of trust and accountability that they feel this government has shown. And so we are continuing to follow up on exactly what is happening, even 2 days after a media roundtable at State House Sunday night, where the president agreed to Gen Z's demands that the only environment that would be comfortable discussing their issues was on X, on the X platform. They have continued to take to the streets. Of course, this invite for dialogue from the president and the Gen Zs on platform X has attracted mixed reactions from the Gen Z. Some have welcomed it, while others have expressed reservations over the same. And that is what we are seeing, with them still taking to the streets and continue to air their displeasure. They continue to take to the streets, this being Tuesday and this being exactly 3 weeks after they started these protests. We continue to see them back on the streets in protests that began with the rejection of the finance bill. The youth say they are unhappy with President William Ruto's leadership and vow to continue the demos on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And the pictures on your screens right now are from Waiyaki Way. Let's cross over to the CBD and see what is happening in the Central Business District. There again, heavy police presence and police continuing to keep protesters at bay. Businesses have been affected in parts of the city, as well as public service transport, public service vehicles. Most of them continue to be parked at their bays. Most people have stayed away from the Central Business District today. Apart from the protesters, businesses remaining closed, and of course, a lot of roads blocked today as the Gen Zs continued to make true their word that they would take to the streets once again. Today they have resumed their Tuesday demonstrations, and we continue to monitor what is happening in parts of the country. Kenyans have also raised concerns over excessive use of force by police officers, as well as recent abductions. And of course, many Kenyans remain under custody. Those who picketed and were seen to have engaged in destruction of public property remain in police custody. And these are some of the concerns that the protesters have raised, saying that some of the abductions are in fact unconstitutional, that most persons that remain in custody were not booked in police stations and cannot be accounted for or found. This is what is happening. We have not seen any pockets of the KDF after President William Ruto assured protesters that KDF will not be on the streets if the protests are kept peaceful. We're still keeping an eye on that because it was his assurance that that would not happen for as long as the protesters kept their demonstrations peaceful. To Wayakiwe and see the situation there. Wayakiwe is right here in Nairobi County, and it is the central point that leads towards Westlands, which also leads to Nairobi Central Business District. It is also the central point that leads to Kangemi, as well as Nakuru County, going to a culture that has become a Tuesday and Thursday demonstration culture. While they achieved their goal of having the bill withdrawn altogether, the Gen Z continue to insist that they want several changes in the way things are done in the country. And of course, they continue to make this very evident by continuing their concerted efforts and move towards protesting every other Tuesday and Thursday. And through their numerous online platforms, they continue to vow to continue their picketing against what they see and describe as rampant corruption, poor governance, and unfulfilled promises by the government of the day. The hashtag being Occupy CBD Tuesday, they called on everyone to come out and join the nationwide strikes. We brought you pictures from different parts of the country, Machakos County, Mombasa County, and other parts of the country. Basically, you know, Kenyans from all walks of life, from different ages, taking to the streets, where they continue to protest amid an olive branch extended to them by President William Ruto, who has since invited them for a dialogue to address their issues. Now, this dialogue is supposed to take place this coming Thursday, but from the look of things, it has done little to stop the concerted efforts of the Gen Zs and other Kenyans from different walks of life to take to the streets and protest. Heavy security presence in parts of the central business district as police keep protesters at bay. And this, of course, coming in the wake of youth who many have described as having no known leader, protesters who insist that they are partyless, protesters who insist that they are tribeless as well, but who are coming together with one common voice, which is the state of the nation and their displeasure at how the current government is running affairs in the country. The Gen Z have also decried the deaths of protesters who they say met their death under the wrath of police officers during the protests. They have also decried what they describe as illegal arrests. We've also seen Kenyans living in other parts of the world, Kenyans in diaspora, Washington, D.C., over the weekend, rejecting President Ruto's plans to engage the public through the National Multisectoral Forum. There's also been demands from diaspora for the immediate release of all those arrested during the nation. nationwide protests. And as the Gen Z continue to take to the streets, the Nairobi business community also raising concerns over lootings and over their businesses remaining closed on two very critical weekdays and business days for them. They say they have suffered losses over the past 2 weeks of protests against the finance bill. The school calendar also seemingly affected, with most private schools remaining closed on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And now we are going to be crossing over to listen to the sentiments of Raila Odinga, who is speaking. As of now, let's listen into that. But before that, again, just to continue with our coverage, we'll be bringing you live updates from different parts of the country. Let's listen into what Azimio leader Raila Odinga has to say.
The Central Committee of the party has this morning held a meeting to deliberate on the ongoing crisis in Kenya. This meeting is happening at a most difficult time for our country, given all that has happened in the last few weeks. We are acutely aware that many families are still in mourning, having lost their loved ones, with civil society groups estimating that over 30 young Kenyans fell to the regime bullets in the course of the street protests. Many of these families are yet to bury these victims. On behalf of the entire ODM party, the Central Committee extends its deepest condolences to all those who have lost their loved ones and pray that God will comfort them in this time of tragedy. We also know that many were injured and some are still in hospital. We wish all of them quick recovery. We are in awe of the Kenyan youth who, through their unity of purpose, have stood with their fallen colleagues and raised vast sums of money in very short times to pay hospital bills for the injured. As a mass movement that has been on this journey of true liberation for a long time, we know how difficult it is to achieve some of the things that we have seen you do. You have absolutely earned our respect as a party, and we salute you. As believers in the right to peaceful protest as enshrined under Article 37, we condemn in the strongest terms possible the abuse of police power in the deployment of violent suppression techniques on innocent and armed protesters. Our position is that no one has to die in exercise of the rights under Article 37. We further condemn the ongoing arbitrary abductions of innocent Kenyans who are carted away in the most violent and inhumane manner and held incommunicado for days. As we speak, the reports are that upwards of 50 individuals have been illegally abducted and their whereabouts remain unknown. To make it worse, it is clear that no one in government is ready to take responsibility, to render an apology, or to make amends. The head of state himself has tried to distance his regime from these killings, injuries, and abductions, instead conjuring up theories when everyone can see the blood on his hands. We have the most callous, insensitive, and obtuse regime in the history of Kenya. It is no wonder that chants of Ruto must go are ringing out all across our land. Government must never abdicate its responsibility to protect life and the property of its citizens. And if it does, as Ruto has done, it deserves to go. As a party that was founded on the tenets of social justice, we shall walk the journey of bringing about justice and accountability for all of the regime's crimes since they took power. We stand with the people in their quest to liberate themselves politically, socially, and economically. Kenyans asked us to stand with them against the punitive tax proposals in the finance bill, and we did. Of the 115 members of the National Assembly who stood with the people and voted against the bill on the floor, 73 were in fact members of ODM. We applaud these great patriots and thank them for being true representatives of the people. As a party, we celebrate you for being on the right side of history, and the party has charged the Honorable Opio and I and the whip, Junet Mohammed, to convey this message to each individual member who stood with the people of Kenya. Sadly, a few of our members went against the wishes of the people and sided with the oppressor, and we will speak to the consequences shortly. In light of this state of affairs, the meeting has resolved as follows. But it is time for all of us in the political leadership to begin to listen. Listen to what the people are saying and not to our own voices. The young people have spoken in plain language that should be clear to everyone. Let's not be vague. Let's just do what the young people are telling the government to do. Number two, we consider this to be Kenya's last best chance. The youth have given our country our last best chance. We either seize it and swim with it by implementing all their demands, or we ignore it and sink the country altogether. Number three, that the Kenya Kwanza regime must take full responsibility for all the deaths, injuries, and destruction of property arising from the violent suppression of peaceful protests. The president must publicly direct his security organs to forthwith seize the ongoing abductions, an exercise that we believe is being undertaken with his full approval and the approval of the state. He must account for and order the release of all detainees abducted by these security agencies. Number four, that the Independent Police Oversight Authority must expedite investigations into all these incidents, including allegations of mass murder by police in Githurai and in Rongai. We were shocked to watch the president claim on live television that only one life was lost. It tells you how out of touch with reality he is. Number five, that in our view, what happened on the 25th of June 2024 amounted to a vote of no confidence in the Ruto regime. It is clear that this fact is totally lost on Ruto. It is reflected in his petulant proposals on how we manage our economy following the rejection of his tax bill. Instead of focusing on cutting wastage, opulence, and corruption in his regime, he is hitting back at the Kenyan people with threats to cut funding for the judiciary and the county governments. Six, that the ODM party will support credible austerity measures in the executive and in parliament. These two institutions have been expressly indicted by the people as citadels of largesse and wastage, with fresh memory of the invasion of parliament and standing threats for occupation of the executive seat of power. These two institutions must have an honest introspection on their contribution to our current predicament and take measures to lessen the taxpayers' burden. As a party funded by taxpayers ourselves, we will also be taking steps to scale down on our presence across the country and some of our activities to reflect this new economic reality. Lastly, that ODM shall initiate and lead recall processes in the following constituencies in light of the current office holders' repeated violation of their sacred oath and the wishes of their electorate. Number one, Game constituency. Number two, Bondo constituency. Number three, Navaholo constituency. Number four, Kajiado Central. Number five, Ikolomani. And lastly, Suba South in Homa Bay. Thank you. That is the end of the statement. Eric. Yes, sorry. Kirui, can I first take questions that are related to the statement we've read? Brian, please. The youth have spoken in clear and certain terms. Let us not pretend like we don't hear what they are saying. You have heard it, we have heard it, Ruto has heard it. Next question. No, because nobody believes what the president is saying. His actions and words are totally different. And what we have called for in our statement, first of all, is he must publicly speak to his police, publicly, and tell them that he knows what they are doing and Kenyans have asked that he stop. So if he doesn't stop that, really, there is really nothing to discuss. Many of the people he's looking for to have a discussion with are actually in custody. Let's look. Six. Yes. Yes, the criteria was very simple. In our statement, we have said repeat offenders. Those who voted against the wishes of the people in 2023 and again did it in 2024 because there are few who met their Damascus moments this year. Yes, this is the criteria we have applied, look, and we want to be able to focus on these six as a lesson to all the others. Is there any other question? Thank you. Thank you very much.
ODM party leader Raila Odinga there with members of his party attending the party central committee meeting where ODM Secretary General Edwin Sifuna has spoken, and in a statement issued by the ODM party have decried the killings of young Kenyans who have fell victim to bullets aired by police officers in the wake of the protests. The ODM party saying over 30 young Kenyans have fell victim to the bullets and indiscriminate killings by police. The ODM party also saying that it is in awe of Kenyan youth and what they have achieved in standing in solidarity by raising money for their injured and also standing in solidarity with their fallen compatriots. Those who died during the protest by raising money for their burials and also raising money for those who are injured and still in offices. They also proceeded to condemn the abuse of police power on innocent and armed protesters, saying that no one has to die while exercising the rights of the Constitution. The ODM party has also condemned abduction, saying upwards of 50 individuals have been abducted in the ongoing protests, and that it is clear that no one in government is ready to take responsibility. The ODM party also criticized the head of state for distancing himself from these abductions, saying that the government must never abdicate its responsibility to protect lives. The ODM party also saying in its statement that it stands with the people, and that of the 115 members of the National Assembly who rejected the Finance Bill 74, of those members were from the ODM party, and the meeting has resolved, this ODM special meeting has resolved that it is time for political leadership to begin to listen. And the ODM party continued to say that they consider this to be Kenya's last best chance, saying that if the country is able to seize this opportunity and implement the demands of the youth, then maybe then there is a chance to redeem the country from the chaos that we are currently seeing in different parts of the country. The ODM party also calls on the Kenya Kwanza government to take full responsibility of deaths and destruction of property, and called on President William Ruto to instruct his security organs to seize abductions and to release all detainees. Also calling on the Police Oversight Authority to investigate the mass killings in Githurai, and saying that what happened with Kenyans rejecting the finance bill is a vote of no confidence, reflecting in the fact that Kenyans have lost complete trust in the government of the ODM party, finishing its statement by saying that as a party funded by taxpayers, they will take steps to cut down on expenditure, and also called out office holders for repeat violations, mentioned Kem constituency, Bondo, Nabaholo, Suba, and others as well. That, of course, being a statement that was given by the party Secretary General Edwin Sifuna, and in attendance was ODM party leader Raila Odinga during the party central committee meeting that is currently underway. We're continuing to keep a look at the situation in different parts of the country as Gen Zs resumed their Tuesday demonstrations today. They are back on the streets protesting against the Finance Bill 2024. They are also continuing to express their unhappiness with President William Ruto's leadership on different social media platforms. We've been bringing you pictures from different parts of the city here in Nairobi and also in other parts of the country. As we continue to take a look at what is happening in parts of the country, I'm joined in studio by Ken Echesa. He is a political scholar as well as an advocate of the High Court. We're looking at a situation that is replaying itself 3 weeks down. We're seeing a relentless group of protesters who, despite the president in his televised interview on Sunday extending an olive branch, saying he is open to dialogue, have continued to take to the streets. What distinguishes the style of these Gen Z protesters compared to previous generations of activists in Kenya? We're seeing them continuing to be relentless, even despite the president continually coming on TV and taking a different stance on issues, saying he is willing to listen. We still see them relentless as ever.
Thank you, Lillian. What we are witnessing in our country is unprecedented. In our history, we've never witnessed such demonstrations, not even in our worst moments in 2007 during the post-election violence. It is even more unfortunate that the President of the Republic has addressed the nation 3 times, on 3 occasions, but the demonstrators are still on the streets. One thing, the demonstrations today are happening under a very different regime, under the new constitution, which offers a lot of protection for the demonstrators in terms of the Bill of Rights. Number 2, the demonstrators are using unprecedented methods in terms of mobilization, social media mobilization. But most importantly, that this is the first demonstration in our political history that is leaderless, is not directed by anyone. So there is no one to negotiate with, no one to talk to, and no one to convince to cede the ground. What the president should do, in my opinion, is to struggle and harness the national goodwill so that the nation is with him in convincing the Gen Z to stop the demonstration. But unless and until the president harnesses the national goodwill through action, we're going to continue witnessing these demonstrations, which are causing untold havoc to the economy of our country and the social fabric of our nation. We've just listened to the Prime Minister's party, Raila Odinga's ODM, give a press conference, and we thought that it was going to be a press conference that is going to call for calm and what, but what we see is actually a rubber stamp of what is going on, and still calling on the president to react to what the Gen Z, the demands that he has been given.
And this has moved away from being a Gen Z movement, because what we are seeing now is the Gen Z themselves calling on all all Kenyans of all walks of life, of all ages, to marshal their support behind this mass movement. In terms of, before we get to the ODM and their statement, in terms of how the Kenyan government has responded to these protests, we know that the president has addressed the nation 3 times now. So in terms of the response to these protests and what impact this had on this mass movement, what is your analysis on Kenyans' response to the president, even now being open to dialogue this coming Thursday?
One, in the eyes of Kenyans, the president has been abandoned. He is seemingly the only one who seems concerned in government that there are demonstrations. The rest of government is not speaking. The minister in charge of security and interior has not spoken to the nation for the past more than 72 hours. And the president has been making serious attempts to speak to the nation, but the nation seems not to be listening. Why is the nation not listening? Perhaps the president is not speaking to the heart of where the problem is. There was a list that was circulating within social media of the demands that people are making. And these are not the demands by the Gen Z, it's the demands of the Republic coming through the Gen Z. Even the simplest of the demands, by now and by demonstration of goodwill, I think the government and the president ought to have acceded to 1 or 2 to demonstrate to Kenyans that we are indeed concerned about what this generation is raising. What the president requires does not even require the Thursday meeting, a forum. The president can issue an executive order that will address 70% of what this young generation has raised. The offices, the corruption issues, the revision of government, reducing of the ministries, is something that the president can do through an executive order. He doesn't have to wait for the meeting. And if the Kenyans have to listen, then we have to keep asking the government, what is the bare minimum you are doing before people go on to the negotiations? But without that, I think we're going to go into much storytelling. We have meetings that are being planned, but I think the government is also getting it wrong. If you go on space as the head of state and as a government, how many Kenyans are on Twitter? You're going to need to speak to a different group from the people on the streets. Will the president target the people now on the Wayekwe demonstrating on the CBD? Some of them have no phones. Those who have phones, perhaps they're not smartphones. Those with smartphones have no bundles. So what is your target audience?
Yeah, and talking about target audience, I want us to go back to the altering of the public discourse around governance and accountability in Kenya. The X space being one of the ways that the president has said he is open to engaging with the people who are obviously really making their opinions known and seen on these social media platforms. But in terms of you saying that this would leave out a significant chunk in terms of public discourse, we're talking about religious institutions, we're talking about many other interested parties that might perhaps not find an opportunity to voice their opinions here. What would be the best way forward? Now that you say that perhaps the X space might not be the best avenue to find a way forward.
One, the president needs to start by demonstrating goodwill, the general goodwill, by doing the bare minimum. If there are issues of corruption in government, he has the power to hire and the fire. Let him do that. If there are things he can do without necessarily getting approval of institutions, let him do that. And secondly, he has to break the audience into some targeted groups. If you want to meet the youthful people, go to the social media. If you want to meet the churches, go to FCK. If you want to meet the media, talk to the media. If you want to meet the religious community, the business community, go to different business communities. And he must release his government to deal with this issue. The government, the public is wide. He may not be able to address all the issues as the head of state. He must first bring his government together, and he must ensure that the whole of government approach is involved in solving this crisis. For instance, we have people who listened to him on Sunday, but how many people are able to watch the mainstream media that he was speaking to? This is the time to even go to the local media stations and to organize county-based forums and speak to the stakeholders. If he is alone and he can manage this, let him do it. If he has the government that he can delegate, let him do it. But there seems to be a breakdown in communication between the president, between the government, and the people who are being governed. And that is why, as he speaks, nobody seems to be listening. And that tells him he has to change the approach of engaging Kenyans.
Nobody seems to be listening, but do you believe that this wave of activism could lead to substantial changes in government policy? The things that people are basically talking about, governance, accountability, political dynamics. Do you think that we will see a shift by taking to the streets and by continuing to say what you're saying is not enough, we're still not hearing you, you're still not hearing us? With this very aggressive and continuing wave of activism, are we likely to see any substantial change?
Yes, and we're already witnessing the substantial change because for the first time the president has refused to assent to a bill passed by parliament, not on his own accord, but by bowing to the pressure of the electorate. For the first time, we have seen members of parliament apologizing to the nation and their constituents for voting in a particular way that was not inconsistent with the people that they represent. We're going to see a wave of change in the way government policy is developed, is implemented. We are going to see a fundamental change in the way government deals with corruption. What this generation has demonstrated to government is, one, we can ask you to act. If you don't act, we can act as well. In terms of getting the people's power and people's voices to be heard, we have succeeded as a country through this generation. However, my fear is that if this goes unmitigated, we are going to cause havoc and untold mystery in terms of economic and the social fabric of the nation. People are dying, lives are being lost, property is being destroyed, and we do not seem to have an end game to all these. This is a movement that is leaderless. This is a movement that is tribeless. You can't go back to your tribe and say, I am under attack. Even at your own hometown, people are demonstrating. You can't go back to the leader and say, please let us talk. They have no leader. So it calls for some high levels of wisdom and approach to tackle this movement.
There have been concerns that as these protests continue, there's the risk, of course, of loss of lives. Let's talk about the role of police and security officers in managing these demonstrations. Of course, we've seen use of disproportionate force against the protesters. We've seen incidents involving the firing of live ammunition, wielding of batons, deployment of tear gas, the purple rain, or is it the pink rain? You might call it purple or pink, depending on whether you're colorblind or not. But in terms of the role of security forces in managing these demonstrations, your assessment 3 weeks down the line in how they have handled this entire crisis, what would that be from where you're sitting as an observer?
As an observer, I think the security agencies have failed the nation. One, the primary role of the security agents is to protect the citizens, to protect life, and secondly is to protect property. You cannot end people's lives in the name of protecting property. It is life first, then property second. And we have seen police use excessive power, use knife bullets, use tear gas guns, throwing them at demonstrators, and in the end, killing them. And this perhaps is where the government is getting it wrong in terms of approaching and dealing with the demonstrators. We are using the 18th century approach to the 21st century demonstrators. Previously, people would carry stones, people would mobilize by political heads. Today, these young people are mobilizing themselves through social media. They are releasing placards and leaflets on social media telling them, we're occupying parliament, we're occupying CPD, and so forth. But the police are still deploying the same mechanism they used 2-3 years ago to quell demonstrators demonstrating today. Previously, they have been targeting the leaders. Today, they are not to get to target. And therefore, the first approach is let us educate the police on the best approach to dealing with the 21st century demonstrations, especially the Gen Z demonstrations. 2, 3, 4 days ago, ago, a judge sitting in Malindi issued an order restraining the police officers from using tear gas, live bullets, and rubber bullets. What we are witnessing on our screens are the policemen using tear gas and doing everything that the judgment spoke against. And when the president spoke to the nation, he committed to rule or to stand with the rule of law. He kept sticking to the rule of law. And one of the demands by the Gen Z generation is adhere to the rule of law. If you cannot respect a simple court order telling you do not use rubber bullets, do not use live bullets, do not use tear gas, and in the open media space we are seeing them using tear gas and so forth and so on. But where is the goodwill?
But Ken, we did see there from pictures in Kagame, while these protests started off as being largely peaceful, they seem to have taken a life of their own. And we must admit and accept that there are people who take advantage of such protests, criminals, petty, looters and robbers and what have you. So while the police, might argue on their own that they are ready to escort and provide security to the protesters, we have seen elements of persons that have taken advantage of these protests and actually thrown, stones and hurled stones at the security organs that are on the ground in such a situation. How then would the police